Alright, tonight I had the story of the tail beasts and their Jinchirikis and like how that all started and everything. The story of like each Jinchiriki and the relationship with each tail beast, and I'll be talking over like every Jinchiriki as they appear and other things, right? Or like as in order, from 1 to 9. So it all started a long, long time ago in the land of that, right? Kagyo Tsuki, you ended up ruling over those people, and she had two sons. She had Hagoromo, which became later known as the Sage of Six Paths, and Homura, who was his brother. They worked together to box their mother in. She needed to be sealed away. She was just too powerful for these animals. Even though they were half-breeds and males, she was pure alien and she did other shit. So they had to box her in real quick. And then Homer went up to the moon, and then Hagoromo stayed on the Earth, right? And he did cause Teninshu. He eventually had two sons, and they ended up, being the like progenitors or whatever of the Uchiha clan and the Senju clan. But even so, there was other things at play, other powers at play. These powers were, Hagoromo's powers, right? He was a 10-tailed Jinchuriki, right? But, before he died, he cut the tail beast into 9 sections. Now, other people may say equal parts, but it wasn't equal parts. As we all know, some things. I'll tell you which tail beast had the most chakra, but it should be obvious. All the tail beasts were, created by Hagoromo, and then they were all scattered throughout the, world. They each had their own like sphere, environment that they could thrive in and other things. And they like typically stayed there. They didn't really roam out unless like human intervention, came and like, forced the tail beast to like, into submission and then, using them for powers of their own. This became more prevalent, I would say, during the times of like building nations and whatnot. Well, we really get the stories of these Jinchurikis and other shit, right? So, at the first 5 Kage summit, that's when they like talked about the tail beasts and divvying them out and everything else. Now, the Tanuki was already in the sand village. They already understood that they were going to keep the Tanuki and everything else, and it was like decided at the 5 Kage summit that they were going to keep the Tanuki there, which is Shukaku, and he was going to be their tail beast. So after that shit happened, right? Tanuki was sealed inside of that old man. I don't remember what his name was, but he became like a priest, a monk of sorts. Like through like years of having Shikaku inside of him, he just like held him at bay essentially, so that he wouldn't run rampant and destroy the village of the hidden sand village, right? But then he also he was like, yo, you can't come out of your fucking dwelling. We have you locked up. You only get food and everything else. So like for like we'll say like 80 years this guy lived, and he had the shikaku in his body his whole life, and he was like, when it came time for the end, he was just like, you know what, it's funny, I never wanted to be the Jinchuriki to begin with, and like people treated me different ways in my life and other things. But it's a funny thing, you hate me too, because you're sealed inside of me and you don't get to run around like an actual animal would. But at the end of the day, you're actually the closest friend I ever had, even though you hate my guts. Now you're going to have to go somewhere else because I'm dead. So he died, and then eventually Rasa, in like the times of Rasa then, put the tail beast inside of his son. And Rasa was the fourth Kazakage, Gar's father. And Gar became the Jinchuriki host of Shikaku, right? So when he was the host of the Shikaku, his father ended up, not liking that he couldn't use his son for power, and like he was kind of like out of control and other things. So he tried to, have his son assassinated. When Gara saw that he killed his uncle, and his uncle didn't really care about him, he was following orders of his father. He found out his father was trying to kill him. He then started, rampaging more. And Rasa had like problems on his hands, trying to keep that at bay, and he did. He kept the Shikaku inside of his son, but his son like had a like animalistic type of nature. It was built in because his father did shit like that. Didn't treat him well. didn't, show him enough appreciation or anything. Didn't take him through any type of training to try to learn the tail beast or to control the powers and shit. He had to learn that himself through like trials and errors and shit, living his life. So he ended up going into the Hidden Leaf Village and the Chunin exams and fighting against Naruto. Signs of Shikaku showed in like, many of fights like, Rock Lee and then, um, Sasuke as well. But Sasuke and, Naruto ultimately was the ones who actually like made Shikaku appear again. And Shikaku was always happy when he, got to take over Gaara's body because he was, an animal. And like nobody ever talks about this side of shit, but like I'm kind of, talking about it a little bit. The animal then got to be free and like, run crazy. Now like when you take something and, it's wild and then you try to like trap it and keep it at bay and then like the animal is just like, I know I'm supposed to be out there. That's why he like had hatred towards humans and shit. And then he was fighting and, running around destroying shit. But then Naruto defeated him by getting to Gaara and, letting Gaara know, hey man, I'm the same way. So after that, Gar then became a better person. And when he became a person that didn't see, killing as sport or that he should use his powers to, for good. His strength was used to protect other people and not to, run around and like bully people or like kill people or, just kill people for sports. So then he, eventually, became the most powerful. I mean, he almost basically was the most powerful Saiyan ninja. So then, 3 years later, he becomes Kazakage. But that was short-lived a little bit because Katsuki made their move. Deidara fought against Gar. Gar, at this point had better control over his own emotions, which actually kept Chikaku at bay. He didn't want to lash out because he knew that if he allowed Shikaku to take over his body, Shikaku would run crazy over the village, and then he would like it just ain't a good look for your Kazakage to do shit like that. But he was still fighting against Deidara and everything else, right? He did the best he could, but he got caught, and when he got caught, he died. But he got revived by Granny Chio, but now Shikaku was sealed within the Ten Tails husk, but he came back later and shit, right? Gar kept living his life, and he was found himself at the Kage Summit in the current like timeline, with like the current Kages of that time, of Naruto's time and his time, right? And he's like the youngest one there and everything else, and he's like, the Akatsuki is a fucking issue. They came from my life, they actually took my life, but luckily for me, I'm still alive. And then he's like, letting them know that it's a fucking serious issue and they should like take the thing seriously, reiterating why they're all there and shit, right? And then like he sees how they try to use the tail beast for like their own gains and shit. And he's like, God damn, y'all, what the fuck? It's kind of like, because he knew how it was being a Jinchiriki, but now he wasn't. See, then he became the leader of the Allied Shinobi forces. He went into battle against the Kages. He fought against his own father, defeated his father, and then he fought against Maru Uchiha with the other 5 Kage, being the youngest one there. He was still helpful, but not really, because this is Madara. He's a one-man army. He, played games with the whole Shinobi forces. Then Shikaku was released, but only after Naruto fought Obito and fought against what's his fucking name, Madara, yeah. And then, but like Madara and Gaara and Shikaku linked up again, and they were like, yo, we weren't the best of friends, but we still kind of miss each other, and we can use the Grandstand Mausoleum to like box this fool in. And they did that together, but then he was, it's Madara, so he was able to pop out and then catch Shikaku again and become the Ten Tails. Gaara was like, damn, he needs to be free. He needs to just be a beast in the village or whatever now. And then eventually he got freed again after Sasuke tried to use his powers to, defeat Naruto, which didn't work. And then Shikaku and Gaara lived in the same village. The end of their story. It ended on a like good note. We don't go into Boruto over here because we don't, like that shit. It's interesting, but it's not interesting enough. I know, throw shade at the Green Angel if you want to or whatever, but we're waiting for, 2 Blue Vortex to come out. That sounds more interesting to me. Now, I did see Boruto and other things, but I know Shikaku was like put in a pod or something, and then They like basically watch over him and other shit. But now the two tails, the second tail beast that Harem created in his or she, Matatabe was a blue cat, blue fire cat, feisty and other things, right? And this cat, only known Jinchuriki holder for it was Yugito Ni, and she was running around in Cloud Village. The Cloud Village got the two tails along with another tail beast that we'll talk about later, right? He then or she, you know, didn't I wouldn't say she mastered it, and this is how I could tell. When she was getting, hunted down by Hidan and Kakazu, they were like they cornered her. She was using a portion of the power and shit. So she had like, understanding of how her Keka Genkai worked, which was blue fire, right? Now she this cat was like, took control of her body, and he on remarks, he's like, damn, this bitch like basically let the tail beast like take her over and shit, and she's now like, the Matatabi is now fighting in Yugachini's stead and shit, and then they had to fight against Matatabi. They were able to catch her, Yugachini. She was defeated, died because the extraction of the tail beast, and later on she was recouped, rebought, and used as like one of the six paths of pain, but through like Obito's jutsu. So like one eye had the Rinnegan and one eye had the Sharingan. And then their eyes were linked. She was like with like 500 Jinchurikis that died due to the extraction process. But then they were fighting against Nacho and Killer Bee. Killer Bee saw her again and was like, damn, he found out the chakra rods were in her chest. Eventually, they figured out that um, Tail Beasts were like, damn, we don't like being, called back like this. We're chained up, and also the Jinchurikis that we were inside of died and shit. We kind of had relationships with them. We might have not had the best relationships with them, but Yugito Ni needs to be free and like pass on to the afterlife and shit. She don't need to be, her body don't need to be played with and shit. So then Naruto freed her, and then she passed on. After that though, Matatabi then went and she was captured by Obito, sealed inside Ten Tails Husk. He became Ten Tails, Madara became Ten Tails. Then, Sasuke, took over or used her power to fuel his Ender energy, right? But then after that, went back to the Cloud Village. That's all we know about that. Now, the next Tail Beast is Ibosu, right? Isabu, right? Isabu the Three Tails. Isabu the Three Tails had two Jinchuriki holders. Now it was a three tailed, a turtle that had three tails, right? And it used coral release, and it had water jutsu as well. Now the first user of, or the ones that's known in chronological order, right? That is Rena. This girl, who was a part of Team Minato. She ended up, she ended up dying because of, see, they sealed her with the three tails. She didn't know quite what was going on. She had been a Jinchuriki for not that long. She was taken by them to use as a ticking time bomb in a sense. Like, she would go into the Leaf Village, and once she lost her mind because she was inexperienced at having the tail beast inside of her, the Ibose, or Isabu would run around and like destroy everything, and Isabu would just like fuck shit up, right? Because he would take over Rin's body, and then she wouldn't have control. Now it was like smart like decision on their part, but then shit came down to Kakashi finding her. He killed her, and then Obito saw that, it awakened his Mangekyou Sharingan, and that spiraled into like how the Akatsuki got started ultimately, because Obito saw that shit happen. His Mangekyou Sharingan got awakened, and then he also he started planning, the revival of Rin, or like the, his idea of what it should have been and other things through the infinite Tsukuyomi that Madara was talking about. So he like then was more sold on that idea and shit. And then after that, he created the Akatsuki, and that also comes into play with the next three tails host, which was Yagura. Yagura became the fourth Mizukage, and he was, they were like, excited, but also like, they understood he was a tail beast and shit too, or Jinchuriki. So it was like, yeah, this guy could like, reform the, and he was younger too, just like Gar. And he was one of two Kages that had the tail beast still within him and shit, right? During like those times and shit, right? Because Naruto wasn't Kage yet, but So this boy ended up, coming to power. But then Obito, like I said, he's linked to like all the Three Tails hosts, right? So after that, Obito um, manipulated him through genjutsu. Blood Mist Village was like then rampant during his reign. So this meant that during the shooting selections and even to graduate to become ninja, right out of the ninja academy, you would have to kill all your subordinates and shit. So basically, they were creating real lethal, ruthless warriors, ninjas, through this method. But they were losing a lot of people through this method. But Yagura was like, being manipulated by Obito, and Obito was like, playing games with his, mind and shit, right? Now he, revealed himself to Kisame, and eventually they, ran with the Akatsuki, because they were the Akatsuki and shit. They left the village. They took Yagura with them. Now I don't like really know what happened, like if the Three Tails left during the like exchange, right? If like Yagura like hopped out before he could like get sealed away completely or whatever. But the Three Tails was then like it left, like they got away, it got away from the Akatsuki somehow. But then Obito went back with Deidara to help him catch the Three Tails, but he was under the disguise of Toby. He didn't really know what the fuck was going on, but he actually knew what the fuck was going on. And then Deidara caught the Three Tails with the help of Toby, and they sealed the Isabu, or yeah, Isabu, inside of the Ten Tails husk. Yagura had died and shit, during this, because he was the host of the Jinchiriki, and every Jinchiriki dies when it's extracted. Um, so then he was revived. Yagura was recouped, and he fought against Naruto and Killer Bee. He was using that mirror technique. He made them see a reflection of themselves, like little like clones and shit. He was then fighting against Naruto and shit. Naruto saw him and was like, "Damn, you look younger than me, but you died young," and it's so sad and other things. And he's like, I was a Kage and other things before I died. You gotta kind of have like a little more respect on my name, And he was talking to Naruto a little bit, and he found out, this ain't right, he needs to like pass on and move on. His life's over and other shit, don't play games with his fucking body, and then, Isabu went and he fucking, went inside the Ten Tails, became part of the Ten Tails, Madara, Obito, you did what they did, and then Sasuke went up and, absorbed, that power to use in the indirect arrows, right? So after that shit happened, right? Three Tails went back to the Mist Village. It was one of the two tail beasts that they had. The other one's coming up later. Now the Four Tails, I like the Four Tails. Now the Four Tails was given to Ishikawa, right? Isn't that his name? The first Tsuchikage. This old man was like, cool, we got this tail beast. And he used Scorch release or no, lava release, magma release, Earth and Firestar, right? He was known as Son Goku, that tail beast's name. He was a monkey and shit, right? And Roshi was his Jinchuriki host, and the only one known and shit, right? So, during like the Third Great Ninja War, he was used during battles and shit, against, Minato and like the Hidden Leaf Village and other shit, right? Now he eventually like was like, I don't want to fucking, he calls to be in the military power for, the Stone Village. I'm gonna do my own thing. He like kind of was like a rogue ninja and shit at that point, and then like for his village and shit, and he was just trying to live his life and shit. But that was short lived or whatever, because Roshi was then found by Kisame and Itachi. And when he was found by Kisame and Itachi, he fought against, Kisame, and he ended up losing due to, Samehada pulling, chakra out of him. Now he kind of like, I would say he did have the advantage, even though water beats, fire or whatever, but it's still like earth, because it's like, lava and like hot rock, So he could still do shit, but unfortunately, also Itachi was there for insurance with the Tsukuyomi. So then he did get caught and he did die because he got the tail beast attracted to him. Son Goku went inside of the Ten Tails husk, and then he was dead. But then he got revived or by reanimation jutsu as one of the six paths. That Obito was using the six paths jutsu with his Renegon to control his body. Right, had the chakra rods in his chest and everything else, and he was fighting against Naruto and Killer Bee. He was actually burning through Naruto's, chakra mode, and burnt Naruto and shit. That's how strong this scorch release was, or the lava release was, right? With Roshi. Now, you know, Son Goku was the first one that Naruto came into contact with, and he saw the chains on him. He was like, "Damn, um, you're being, forced to do this." And he's like, "Yeah, of course I am. All you humans do is fucking use us for like, your own benefit to like, play games with us and use our powers for like your benefit. Um, you know, you're no different than them." But then he started looking at Naruto more, and he's like, "Hold on, you might have like some characteristics of old man Hagoromo and shit who created me. Maybe I can trust you. You ain't as bad as the guy who has me fucking chained up right now. Now you're gonna, help me out of this situation, and then you're gonna help Roshi pass on to the next fight. We went on the best of terms, but he don't deserve shit like this. And then they were like, we're free, but then they weren't free. Then they got sucked inside the Ten-Tail Tusk again, and then Obito took over, Madara took over, and then after that, Sasuke used his power to feel his Indra aura, and then the Son Goku then went back to being a tail beast for the Stone Village, or yeah, he was just doing stuff. Um, like I don't even know because like Boruto don't like go into that side of shit. I don't think they don't like look into like the tail beasts and what they're doing too much. But oh, fuck, what was it? Um, Now the five tails was given to the Stone Village as well during the first five Kagesama to Ishikawa, right? And he was also Han was also used as like a military power during the Third Great Ninja War, and met Minato and on the battlefield and everything else, right? Um, but he then became a rogue ninja as well. He used like boiler release, and steam. He was a tall fucking guy. He was the tallest tail beast. He was a big man. And now we don't know who caught him necessarily, but rumor had it that it was Conan of the, Akatsuki who caught him. And his tail beast name was Kokuo. Kokuo was then sealed inside the Ten-Tailed Husk, and Han was, died. And then he was revived, and he, served as one of the paths that Obito was able to control during the Fourth Great Shinobi War. He fought against Obito, or Killer Bee and Naruto, and he fought against them. But then Naruto ended up finding out that it wasn't cool and other things. He took the chakra rod out of Han's chest, and also tried to free Kokuo. Kokuo was then freed later on, after Obito became Ten Tails, or yeah, after he became Ten Tails and was freed from him. Then Madara, chained him up again and put him inside himself and became Ten Tails. Then Sasuke took over and like used his energy for Indra power, to fight against Naruto at the end of the series. Then Kokuo went back to the Stone Village as a tail beast, I believe. That was the shortest one out of all these tail beasts, right? Now, six, this guy, or this tail beast, right, was one of the ones that was also for the hidden miss. It was Ibosu, or Isabu, and Saiken. Saiken's like a slug, right? And Saiken was given to, the old man. Uh, Damn, that first Mizukage, I talked about him and shit. He was cracked out. But eventually, the first, or the only known Jinchiriki for him was Utakata the Six Tails. Utakata the Six Tails was running around as a rogue shinobi. He didn't want to, like he caused, to, like, being, used as a military power or, like, anything like that. He understood that his power was, like, needed for the village and other things, but he was like, it's a, like, big responsibility, and I didn't ask for this. I want to live my life kind of deal. He actually met Naruto in some like filler or whatever, right? And they ended up meeting each other, right? In the anime. They fought against some people, and he was then, gonna go back to the Mist Village because he was like, you know what, I am a Mist Ninja at the end of the day. Some girl was after him and shit, and he was like, I'll go back to the Mist Village, come back, right? And, be in good standing and like fix my village a little bit or whatever, right? With my power that I have. But that was short lived because pain crept up on him. But it was like all six paths and shit. He defeated one of the paths of pain, or like it was or goddamn Saiken was like in control of his body because he went into the blood form. So Utakata wasn't in control of himself at that point. But then he was caught, and then he was sealed away, or the Saiken was sealed away, and then Utakata was dead. Utakata then recouped by um Obito, or well, by Kabuto, and then Obito, had a chakra put in his chest. We saw him use bubble jutsu. Now these bubbles look, cute and they're bubbles, but they explode and they fuck shit up. But Naruto and Kill Bill were able to, fend him off. So after that, they took the chakra out of Takata's chest. Saiken was free for slightly. Then he, became part of Obito, and then eventually Saiken was free again, and then he was sealed inside of Madara, for the Ten Tails, both of them Jinchiriki of the Ten Tails. And then after that, after Kage was defeated, he was, used for, to fuel Sasuke's power against Naruto. And then he went back to the Mist Village. Now, the Seven Tails. The Seven Tails was Chome. Now, this is interesting about Chome and the Seven Tails. The Seven Tails was an outlier. What does this mean? So the Land of Fire had a tail beast, the Hidden Leaf had one tail beast. The Hidden Cloud had two tail beasts. The Hidden Mist Village had two tail beasts. The Hidden Stone Village had two tail beasts. And the Sand Village had the one Shikaku, right? Now, Chome, the Seven Tails, was like an insect. It was like an outlier. So what do I mean? There's other lands in Naruto, not just the five great nations, and they're like in between these, great powers and shit, right? And they're in the outlying areas. They're not in the they ain't in a part of the Land of Fire. They ain't a part of the Hidden Leaf Village. There are other lands like the Land of Rain, the Land of Rain is a good example and shit, right? And then the Land of Grass and the Land of all these fucking lands and shit, right? So like Chome was like an outlier, these other lands can have that shit, in case like whatever, as like a means for them to protect themselves from us greater nations and shit, that type of deal. And eventually, time passed and Fu became the like holder of the Seven Tails Chome. And she was, boxed in, grabbed up by, Hidan and Kakazu. They caught her and then she was sealed away. Chome was sealed away and then she was, killed. Now, Fu had abilities from Chome. It was like a pollen type ability. So this ability allowed her to like, breathe and shit, right? And this pollen would go everywhere, but it was like a genjutsu. But luckily for Naruto and Killer Bee, they didn't have to worry about it because guess what? They were linked up with their tail beast. Naruto had Kurama and then, Killer Bee had, Gyoki. Yuki. And they, linked up and they did what they did, right? So after that happened, right? She went back to the afterlife. Chome was sealed away, and after Chome was sealed away, um, he was sealed inside of Obito, then he was freed, and then he was sealed inside of Madara, and then he was used for, Sasuke's benefit. And then after that, Chome went back to the outlying, areas and shit, as a tail beast, so I was free. That's how his story ends, basically, Now, the longer stories, right? Now, Killer Bee, there was, a couple, Jinchiriki for him. So 8 tails was given to them at the first Kage summit. They had the 2 tails and 8 tails. Hashirama was being smart a little bit. He's like, I have 9 tails. But hey, man, you got 8 and 2 tails. 8 plus 2 is 10. If you're thinking about shit in that manner, you kind of getting the good end of the deal. He was kind of like, saying shit like that to those niggas and shit, right? And they were like, okay, that sounds, that logic makes kind of some sense. Um, Eventually, though, shit turned to, wars came. But like that's why they set that shit up in the first place. We have something like each village has something there as like a power that they could use to defend their village from another village. In the future, if any conflicts came between the five great nations, right? So then Gyoki was then summoned upon a lot of times, but like more of what I'm saying here is it had a lot of Jinchiriki hosts and they couldn't control it. It eventually came down to like Blue B, who was actually like related to the Raikage and shit, right? And he was holding the eight tails inside of him. And he was like, "This is like ridiculous, you know. I didn't ask for this power or anything else. Yuki doesn't even like being inside of me. You know, this fucking life kind of sucks. You know." He eventually had to get killed by the Raikage. The third Raikage had to kill him. The third Raikage fought against, you know, Gyuki, the Eight Tails, a lot, to the point where, you know, Gyuki lost one of his horns, and also, you know, was like, you know, he knew of the third Raikage and like fighting against him and shit, right? And they like, you know, battled with each other all the time. Eventually, you know, A and his father were like, you know, you need to find a brother who can like use the lariat. We'll then, you know, give him some power too, if you know what I mean. We'll put the eight tails inside of him. You know, eventually Killer B, a boy, you know, who like liked to rap and do other things. You know, he had a like, you know, a fun loving personality and shit, kind of. And he was like, you know, kind of cool and other things. He, you know, embraced his role after he got it. He was like, okay, A and B combo, and I'm the B part of it. You know, I'm gonna surpass you one day, bro. You know, he was telling, you know, A that's what he was gonna do, and he was like, you know, he still got time. He went to the island to train and like he became the first true perfect Jinchuriki out of like all these, you know, tail beast users, right? Out of everybody on the list that I talked about so far, he was the one who was like the master and shit. He mastered Yuki. He like actually took the time out of his day to like, you know, I'm Killer B, you know, who are you? You know, why do you hate people? Or, you know, hey man, let me like cheer you up. You know, I'm not trying to like, you know, attack you or anything. You know, this is a process that we're both going through type of shit. And, you know, eventually, you know, he's like, you know what? This guy ain't that bad. You know, Killer B's not a bad guy. He's actually cool compared to the other people I was, you know, in tune with. You know, they always talked about how they hate being the Jinchuriki and other things, and that, you know, they wish that they weren't linked up with me. But he's actually trying to get a relationship with me and figure out what's going on my end of shit. You know, and he eventually became a perfect Jinchuriki. He could call upon the Eight Tails full power and still have his personality intact when he summons all eight tails. Like he turns into Gyuki himself, and he's still Killer B. His personality's still there. He's still rapping, saying, "Yo, yo, yo, I'm gonna blast you, smithereens, yo," you know, that type of thing. And he, you know, was walking around proud and shit. You know, he should have been, because like not many people could do shit like that. You know, you know, and Killer B was, you know, walking around the Hidden Cloud Village. He eventually fought in the Third Great Ninja War. He fought against Minato, you know, with his brother. You know, now he had pretty good sight too. You know, he knew about Minato's abilities. Like he knew that Minato could slip up on him and shit, right? He had a knife, you know, held towards Minato's stomach, while Minato had a kunai to the back of his head. You know, he was good with the fucking Kenjutsu moves, and he found that out. Or well, my main character, you know, my favorite character, Sasuke. You know, unfortunately, he met like his end almost twice to this end. And at the behest of Obito, right? He was like, "You gotta go hunt the eight tails if you want the information about Downs Shimura and other things, right?" And he's like, "All right, fine. You know, I want to kill that bitch, but you know, if you want me to hunt Jinchuriki, I can. It'll give me a chance to test my powers and shit, right?" And he ended up, you know, fighting against Killer B. Killer B was also, you know, good with using his Jinchuriki powers, right? And like other things, you know, he tapped him, you know, Yuki tapped him out of Genjutsu that Sasuke put him under and shit, you know, busted Sasuke's chest open, and then, you know, Yugo and uh, Karian had to heal him and shit, and then he broke out the Mangekyo Sharingan. You know, that shit was like a little bit of a problem for Killer B, but he was smart. He's a experienced ninja, so he was able to, you know, evade that capture by like when Sasuke cut the limb off, you know, he used substitution jutsu and transformation jutsu as well. You know, he hid inside of the like, you know, tentacle that was cut off, and then the other part of him was, you know, just part of, you know, the eight tails tentacle, and then he went back to the he went to the Five Kage Summit too, and he was like, "Hey man, I get to, you know, lead the village. My brother usually has me cooped up in the village, you know, because he's afraid of, you know, the Akatsuki and everything else. Everybody knows about them. running around collecting tailed beasts. But I'm free. I'm a man. I can fucking hold down for myself. And then Kisame showed up, and he was fighting against Kisame to, a decent fight. He busted Kisame's chest open, but unfortunately, he had Samehada on his side. Samehada was able to absorb chakra, and we know that Kisame is known as a tailless tail beast, right? So he was able to, heal his chest, his busted chest that was opened up. He was able to heal that by, eating all of Eight Tails, or not all of it, but a good chunk of it. And Gyoki was like communicating with Kill Bee the whole time. He's like, man, I got my chakra stolen from me. You might have to like use your own, and like really watch out for this guy. Killer Bee ended up linking up with his brother to cut off the head of what he thought was Kisame. Kisame hopped inside of Samehada. Samehada was like had a relationship with Killer Bee afterwards, and he was the wielder of Samehada after a while. Then Killer Bee taught Naruto how to control his tail beast. They went into the battle against Madara after they figured out that the world was fighting for them and like to protect them, and they're like, no, we have the ability to like fight for ourselves and other things. We are shinobi as well. We don't like to see our friends, give their lives away, and we're just sitting by, letting shit pass by. We'll fight too. So then they went and they fought. Killer Bee, showed his brother, that he's, not weak, and he didn't, he ain't little brother per se. He's like, your brother and shit. He is younger brother, but he's like, still strong and shit. You know what I'm saying? He had to let his brother know and shit. And he allowed to like show Naruto too. They got by them, and then they went to, fight against Obito, but they fought against Nagato and Itachi first. Now, Nagato was kind of a problem. He was going to pull the tail beast out of Killer Bee and Naruto, because like at this point, Nagato was recouped and everything else and revived. He didn't have the six bodies controlling things, right? He had all the power himself, the full powers of the Rinnegan. He could pull out any of those abilities for himself. And he had them like boxed in almost, but then Itachi came in, and he had his insurance because he put the crow inside of Naruto. The Genjutsu wore off, or took effect, and eventually they sealed away. Itachi did that. They went and they fought against Obito. He took note of Yukitoni's chest, and he saw the chakra rod sticking out of her chest. He's like, oh shit, girl has the chakra rod in her chest. That must be what's controlling them. Because Naruto, remember fighting against Pain and how he had the chakra rod in his chest. They put two and two together and they fought, defeated that part of things. What I'm saying is the Jinchirikis would then, went on to the afterlife and other things, but then they kept on fighting against Obito and Madara. Now, eventually, Madara came back to life completely and shit, completely revived and shit, right? And he fought against all the tail beasts. He chained up all 9 tail beasts. He was able to like chain them all up, and he pulled them inside of himself and became the 10 tails. Now, Killer Bee was like knocked out or something. He didn't die from this because eventually he got the 8 tails back, and he became the 8 tails Jinchuriki again, and he just lived his life as like a, secretly or known by, the older people in the fucking world that he was the best, person in the like, hidden Cloud Village, and he just lived his life in the Cloud Village, in his later years, right? Now Naruto Uzumaki, but we ain't going there first. I know Naruto, hey, that's our boy and shit, right? That's what people are saying, right? But we have to, first start with the first known one. Now, let me go back to the very beginning, though, right? So, Hagoromo split these, tail beasts. He's like 9, commas on his fucking back. So, 9, parts sealed, cut the 10 tails into, right? But these weren't equal parts. So, like, most of the, half of the power went into Kurama. People caught on to that eventually too, mainly Hashirama. But Madara found the 9 tails, and he was like, "You're a tail beast. You're no different than an animal that should be trained by a master, and I'm your master." So then he took over, Kurama. Now, Kurama was then, used a lot. He was used a lot. Somehow these animals knew that the 9 tails had most of the chakra and shit, so then they hunted his dick a lot. Kurama had his dick hunted a lot by people, and that's why he was the most hateful and the most, unapproachable, the most, he had the most hatred towards fucking human beings because they kept like using his fucking abilities, and like taking his mind over and other things, right? So he fought against, Hashirama at the behest of Madara Uchiha. Then Hashirama, freed him from the mind control, but then he sealed him inside of Mito Uzumaki, his wife. She had sealing jutsu. She put chains on the animal and like kept him at bay for like years. He was sealed inside of Mito Uzumaki for a long time, and then he was just put inside of another Uzumaki woman who also knew of sealing jutsu because she learned it from Mito Uzumaki. So then Kushina was able to, to an extent, keep Kurama at bay. Now, when she was younger, she did like lash out and other things, and Minato had to help her out. And, eventually they got together. Kushina, Uzumaki, and Minato Namikaze, they got together and they had a child. We know who this child is. This is Naruto Uzumaki. But actually, before all that shit happened, right? Um, and see, I don't know. I think that Mito Uzumaki, sealed the nine tails inside of her, not after the Madara attack. So, because I have to backtrack a little bit, and this is why, because these two ain't Jinchiriki hosts, but I had to note this too, because it goes into why like Kurama is like such a hateful towards human beings and shit, right? So, during like the first Great Shinobi War or the second Great Shinobi War, I don't remember which one, but it was during the generations of the like seconds and shit. So uh, the second Raikage had two guys, who were branded with the lightning tattoo, the Gold and Silver brothers, Kinkaku and Ginkaku, and they were like wild animals and shit. They sought power and other things. They held Hagoromo's sealing tools and other shit, right? But then afterwards, they were running around in the forest. They saw the Nine Tails. They sought the power for themselves. They got ate by the Nine Tails, but the Nine Tails, spit them back up. They eat the inner guts of the Nine Tails. They eat his gator tracks, and they gain powers from it. This was seen later on when they got recouped and revived. Darui, another person who was branded by the later Raikages, right? I had to fight against these two, and he ended up sealing them away inside of the sealing urns that they knew how to use. But I had to note that because it goes into why Kurama hated people and shit. So I think after that happened, she or Mito Uzumaki had the nine tails inside of her, or like she like went on a rampage somehow, and then like the nine tails spit them up, and then she like regained control of herself, and then eventually Kushina took over and became the Jinchuriki host, and she was the second one known, right? She had the nine tails inside of her, right? Also during the pregnancy of Naruto and shit, right? Now this is where the beginning of Naruto happens and shit, right? All this shit happened during the night of Naruto's birth and shit. Obito came and he was like, okay, I'm gonna extract the nine tails from you, and then I'm gonna take control of it just like Madara did. He proved himself as Madara to the people and other things, but Minato also knew something was up. He didn't care about that though. The village was under attack and he had to hold down as the fourth Hokage. Now, Saratobi was still there and they all fought against the Nine Tails and kept it at bay. But like at this point, the Nine Tails still had its full power and shit. But Minato took note of how powerful the Nine Tails was and was like, damn, if I seal it inside of my son like full power and shit, he might not be able to control it. But if I like take half of it for myself, and then like I kill myself, half of the like Nine Tails power will go away. It'll just be gone and shit from this world. And like it'll be sealed inside of me, but I'm dead, or whatever. So now the Nine Tails had like half of its power inside of Naruto, like the whole time and shit. Like the whole time, Kurama had like half of his power inside of Naruto, because of Minato's quick thinking and other things. He had the Nine Tails power, sealed inside of him. Right? And Minato did too. That come back later and shit. So Naruto, lived his life and he was, an outcast and shit. He got, a place because of the third Hokage, but he never, did anything. He like made sure he had a place and other things. At least he had a place and stuff, right? The boy, grew up and tried to like, stand out. He lashed out and other things. And he's like, I'm gonna be Hokage one day and other things. This like led to, at this point, Kurama, as the tail beast, is like, oh god damn, I was sealed inside of a bitch for a while, and then I was sealed inside of another bitch for a while. Got half of my chakra taken away, and then this brat is a part of me now, and he's kind of fucking annoying. I don't like him, but he's a brat. So guess what? I can take advantage of him, and I can When he gets emotionally charged and shit, I can then creep inside of him and, force him to lash out, and then I can, pop forward. Now, part of his chakra came out during the Land of Waves arc. We saw him get, Naruto get angry after Sasuke almost died or whatever because of Haku, right? That's when it also popped up. Now during the tuning exams, um, Orochimaru actually sealed the shit away because he found out that he was, sealed. The Nine Tails was sealed inside of him. He was like, "Oh, I'll lock this shit up even more." But then Jiraiya came along and loosened the seal, so Naruto could then use some of Kurama's chakra. Not loosening it too much, of course, but like had the wisdom to be like, he could use more chakra. This boy has like more chakra at his disposal and shit. That came into play when he fought against Neji and shit. He used some of that to beat Neji, right? Then he also used some of that to turn Gambunta into, a replica of the nine-tailed fox Kurama, and then he ended up defeating Gaara. Then the nine-tailed chakra popped out again during his fight against Sasuke. Only one tail of, Kurama's chakra, popped out, the one-tail cloak of the nine tails. And it was not enough power to defeat Sasuke or like put him down. Actually, Naruto got put down during that fight. Naruto took that down and shit. It was not enough chakra and shit, right? But then he trained with Jiraiya for 3 years. Now Jiraiya ended up figuring some things out about Naruto. During their training, Naruto lost his fucking mind after he obtained Four Tails. Once Four Tails showed, he took on the blood form, and then like Kurama was then, in control of Naruto's body. Now Jiraiya, got hurt fighting against that version of Naruto, but then he, put tags on him and shit, and he gave it to Kakashi. Kakashi then used that shit later on when Deidara was playing games with, Gaara's lifeless dead body, smacking his face and stuff. Do you have one cigarette? I don't. But then he was doing that, right? And after playing games and shit, Naruto got fucking angry. Three Tails started forming. He was like, I remember what Master Ra's said. Kakashi went up and like, sealed that shit away. Then after that rescue mission, failed, but then didn't because, Granny Chiyo did what she did. Naruto was then, assigned Yamato because Kakashi got sick. Yamato had, Hashirama's power and the 10th Edict of Enlightenment. What's that? That shit, keeps the Nine Tails' powers at bay and sealed within the Jinchiriki and shit, so they don't lash out and stuff, right? Now, when he saw Orochimaru, that's when the Four Tails cloak popped out, and Orochimaru fought against the Four Tails cloaked Nine Tails, and Orochimaru was doing pretty damn good. But then he had to, back out because he's like, if I have to like fight the Nine Tails like in a higher state, I would probably lose. So he like left. Yamato then, sealed the Nine Tails back inside of Naruto, and then, Sasuke saw the Nine Tails, put him back in his cage because he was trying to creep out of Naruto again. Naruto still have problems with, keeping control of the Nine Tails and other things, and that kind of like kept him, at a disadvantage and other things. If he could master the power, then he could, do things, but it still wasn't there yet. He summoned some of that chakra, like a little bit, to defeat Kakazu. You could tell because when his eyes was blue, it still had the like fox eyes, or we'll call him Kurama's eyes, right? And he had the a little bit of Kurama's chakra in his eyeballs, to like because he had to summon the second Rasen Shuriken, which is an S-class jutsu that only Naruto can use. And at this time, he was like not master. It wasn't mastered yet. He came right straight from the training grounds to like the battlefield and shit to like save everyone. And then Naruto lost Jiraiya and shit, right? That made him sad. But then Naruto learned that he had to, do it for himself. I had the Nine-Tail chakra, but I want to surpass my, sensei too. He would have wanted me to keep doing what I want to do and become the Hokage and shit, so I'm going to do that. And I also want to surpass him. So then he learned Sage Mode at Mount Miraboku, and he actually became a perfect Sage, better than Jiraiya and shit. And then he also fought against Pain, the person who killed Jiraiya. And he defeated Pain, but the Nine Tails did still leak out because that Sage training was not for the Nine Tails. That was strictly for Naruto and Naruto's power, his power. So then the Nine Tails That's a completely different power source and shit, right? I just gotta let y'all know because we know about anime over here and shit, right? Naruto still lost control, because again, that's a different power in shit, right? So then he fought against Pain, the Nine Tails fought against Pain, and the Nine Tails was actually manifesting fully forward because Naruto was about to give in and give up and like let Kurama take full control of his body, like all power and everything else. But then Minato showed up and was like, no, you're my son, and I like, trusted you with this power. I knew you could, handle it. Once he learned that the fourth was his father, he was like, kind of sad and upset. But then he was like, you know what? My father believes in me. I'm gonna like, man up and do this shit. And he ended up fighting against Pain and defeating him. He forced Nagato into talk no jutsu, and then he revived everyone. And then Naruto still had to like master the Nine Tails and shit. He still wasn't mastered and shit. Sasuke had attacked the Five Kage Summit. He went there to see Sasuke. See, Danzo wanted Naruto to stay in the village because he knew that that was like, how it was laid out in like the governmental structures of Naruto or whatever, in the like politics and everything else. That Nine Tails, the Jinchirikis were there for like military power so that they could then protect each village, and the village could then use the Jinchuriki as they see fit. So we're gonna keep Naruto inside of the village and other things. Now, Tsunade was like, understood Naruto as a person and other things. He wasn't just Jinchuriki and other shit. And they're like, I want Naruto to go out on missions and other things. He's actually cool for being a ninja and, complete missions for us. Now, Donzo didn't see shit that way and tried to keep Naruto away. Naruto didn't give a fuck because his friend was over there. So then he went and he, tried to help Sasuke. Then Obito took Sasuke, and then he went to train with Killer B. Killer B trained Naruto where he trained to like learn Gyuki and like become better relations with him. Now he met himself and he like accepted that yeah, I did hate those people deep down for like having me as an outcast and like spitting on me early on and other things, telling me I can't achieve my goals, and then all of a sudden now I'm the and everybody's trying to suck my dick and shit now. But you know, I don't hate myself. I don't need those people. Necessarily. I don't hate those people either. I love who I'm becoming and other things. The past is kind of the past, and it does matter and it is important. But you know, I don't have to hate myself or feel like other people just want to be my friend because I'm more successful now. People actually did see my struggle and did acknowledge me, and I actually do have real friends and shit like that. And he was able to overcome his like hatred that he had toward himself or whatever. But then he had to meet Kurama and shit, and he met Kurama, and he was like, "Hey, man, we gotta like get to know each other better and other things." With Kurama, after years of being fucked with by humans and shit, he's like, "You're just that brat that like all these bitches about, or like yells about being, Hokage and other things. You're no different than other people. You would just use my power for your own fucking benefit and other things." Now Kushina was there. Kushina appeared to Naruto and said, "Son, I'll help you out, and I have, some portion of my chakra inside of you too, so then I can, bear the pin him down and shit." Now this helped Naruto gain Kurama's power, some of it, but it didn't help him get the relationship that he needed with Kurama to actually be a perfect Jinchuriki like Killer B. Now he still had enough power and shit. Now Killer B understood some things too, but he was like, you know what, whatever. He still has some of the Naito's power, and that's enough to, we can go fuck shit up and go help our friends out during the war. Now they went and did that after Kisame tried to pop out and snatch these niggas, right? But then he ended up killing himself because they ended up reversing things, and like they ended up capturing Kisame. He ended up dying and shit. But then they went to the battlefield and shit. Naruto used Shaolin Jutsu and he was in chakra. He went into all the battlefields and fought. One of his clones went to the Five Kage battlefield and he fought against the Five Kage. He defeated the third Raikage, sealed him away or helped seal him away. Then Madara appeared, the real Madara Uchiha. Madara tried to summon the Nine Tails and found out it was in Naruto. Then Naruto, that clone popped. And he knew the information because of, how Shaolin Jutsu works. He let Killer Bee know that, the Kages were fighting against Madara and shit. They had to hold that shit down for themselves. But we have to figure out who is behind the mask. So they fought, and they fought against the other Jinchirikis. Naruto ended up meeting these tail beasts and the Jinchurikis, and was like, we'll get you guys right. We'll get you onto the afterlife and other things. We'll get the chakras out of your chest and shit. And then we'll free you, tail beasts, so you don't become part of the Ten Tails house. They're trying to use your power to put the world on a genjutsu and shit. So then he was running around doing shit like that, right? But then Obito pulled him back inside the Ten-Tail Husk, and then he was fighting. Now, at this point, Kurama was like, you're the better of the two, and actually, your goals, I wouldn't mind seeing those to fruition. You want to become Hokage? You've proven with like my energy and other things that you can overcome obstacles. So like, I might as well link up with you. And then he became a perfect Jinchuriki during this battle and shit. He actually smashed Obito's mask, and then um that reveal happened. Um, Obito then became the Ten Tails Jinchuriki without the Nine Tails energy inside of the Ten Tails husk. And Minato was actually on the battlefield too, and he had the Nine Tails chakra, the other half of Nine Tails. And they both were in, their, tail beast states, Kurama chakra mode, both of them. Both of them family tail beast bombs and other things, right? And then after a while, Obito lost that fight, talking no jutsu and other things. He pulled the tail beast out of Obito. But then Madara came alive. And then when he came alive, he started to like get on the on his shit, and he was like, I'm gonna catch all you, dirty animals and shit. And he did. He chained all nine tailed beasts, pulled the nine tails out of Naruto, and then he pulled the eight tails out of Killer Bee, and became the 10 tails from Turkey. They were fighting against Madara, Mike Guy, and everybody else, right? But to no end, they couldn't do shit. Then when Naruto, got recouped, and Sasuke did too, revived by Agoromo, he's like, you gotta steal away Naruto before he, uses that, technique. They weren't, it didn't get it done in time, and then everybody got put under Infinite Tsukuyomi. Now, Kurama was still part of Naruto for all that time. Afterwards, um, he fought against Sasuke, and with just Kurama's power, he was able to defeat Sasuke. But it took some time. It wasn't like an easy fight like some people make it out to be. Sasuke is my guy, and you have to let people know it's like not that fucking easy. Things would be easily flipped if the show was called Sasuke and not Naruto. Sasuke would have won the fight, right? But this video ain't about that, right? So Kurama then stayed with Naruto. They fought in a couple battles together in Boruto and other things, right? And Naruto was, doing things, and Kurama was cool with it, at this point. He's like, this is Naruto, I understand he's this way and that way, but he's actually a good guy. And, he made me a more toned down animal or whatever, trained or whatever. Trained to like Naruto. Not everybody else really, but, because he like spent his whole life with Naruto and other things. But then it was sad because Kurama burnt his life away in Baryon mode. When Naruto achieved Baryon mode to fight against Ishiki, see, I did watch Boruto because I knew about that fight, right, y'all? So then, he, burnt his life away. His chakra was gone out of Naruto. Naruto didn't have Kurama's chakra anymore. And he, Kurama died basically. Burnt his life out. So Naruto wasn't then the Jinchuriki also the Nine Tails no more. I Naruto had Sage Mode still, so he was able to fight against it in Sage Mode, and he's actually pretty decent at that. Like I said, he's a perfect Sage. But then there's questions and shit because I don't like watch Boruto that much, or I don't read the manga that much. Now I heard that Himawari became a Nine Tails host, but I think somebody's like playing games or like clickbait or some other shit, right? I have to look into that and shit personally. The Green Angel don't know Boruto like that. Anybody in the comment section can let me know if Himawari, his daughter, became the Nine Tails, Jinchuriki host or not. But that is the story of the Nine Tails, or like the Nine Tailed beasts and their Jinchuriki hosts. That's told by me. And like how like all of them had their, lives and other things in a nutshell and other things, right? But be cool, call on the corner, and wait for some other videos I have, I'll make some more story times like this, for other animes and other stuff. Um, and I'll keep the Power Scaling videos coming and other shit. But be cool, Bongo.